Hey, good evening. The Design Review Board public meeting of August 27th, 2020 is called to order. Due to the COVID-19 coronavirus and health recommendations from the LA County Health Department, this Design Review Board meeting is being conducted publicly, virtually, with no members of the public present. The public is encouraged to watch and participate from the safety of their homes to reduce interaction and to practice social distancing. The meeting can be viewed on local cable TV and is being streamlined online at the city's website at www.glendaleca.gov. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting the questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person. Current Design Review Board agendas are available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. Records of decisions for all projects will be posted online on the Planning Division's website. Please note that any appeal of a case heard today must be filed within 15 calendar days of the design review decision date. The appeal application is also available online. Which brings us to roll call. Board Member Simonian?
Present.
Board Member Smith? Board Member Smith? I know she's present, she just needs to unmute herself.
It takes a minute. I pressed the button, it took a while. Present.
Thank you. And Board Member Welch?
Present.
Thank you. There are no Community Development Department updates at this time. Report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before August 24th, 2020. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. These would be the minutes from August the 13th, and all three board members were present. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Board Member Smith, a second by Board Member Welch. Board Member Smith? Board Member Welch? And Chairman Simonian?
Yes.
Motion passes to approve the minutes. And let the record show, I apologize, I saw them nod on WebEx, and so they voiced their yes for approval. We have no oral communication cards or members of the public that have called in for oral communication, which brings us to new business. And we have one case on tonight's agenda, and I would turn the meeting over to either Chairman Simonian or Case Planner Eileen Babakani. So,
Thank you. We'll start off with PDR 2006-285. And with that, we'll turn it over to staff for staff's presentation.
Thank you, and good evening, Design Review Board members. And the case before you, let me just start sharing my screen with my presentation, PowerPoint presentation. The case before you is a design review application, case number PDR 2006-285 for a proposed development located at 1243 Elm Avenue. Location of the property. The proposal is to demolish the existing one-story, 1,875 square foot single-family residence and to construct a new 2,222 square foot two-story single-family residence with a new attached two-car garage and a 7,531 square foot lot located in the R1 Floor Area Ratio District 1 zone. The existing site was developed with the existing one-story house in 1924. The existing house and accessory buildings will be demolished as a result of the project. The existing house is not considered a historic resource under sequel and doesn't appear to be eligible for listing on the Glendale Register of Historic Resources. Staff found the proposed site planning appropriate to the site and its surroundings. The building street front setback is in keeping with the prevailing setback at the front, with the street front setback along Elm Avenue. And as proposed, the existing driveway and curb cut on the street frontage will be demolished, and a new driveway will be built to provide vehicular access to a new attached garage at the front of the house. The location of the proposed garage and new driveway are appropriate to the proposed house and are compatible with the almost 25% of the houses on the block that have already attached garages facing the street, including 2 adjacent neighboring houses. The city urban forestry is requiring 2 new street trees to be planted within the public right-of-way, since the proposed driveway construction will destroy the majority of the existing street trees root system. A condition is added to address this comment. The proposal calls for decorative permeable paving for driveway finish appropriate to the design. A condition of approval is recommending to apply stucco finish on the existing proposed block wall to have an appropriate finish to match the proposed house. New drought-tolerant plants and trees complement the overall design. And in terms of the massing scale, the overall massing of the 2-story house is appropriately broken up by second floor setback at the front and side elevations. As designed, the house fits within the context, scale, and proportions of the neighboring 1- and 2-story homes. For better compatibility with the neighborhood context and to avoid the sense of monumentality, staff is recommending a condition of approval to reduce the floor-to-ceiling plate height by 1 foot at the first and second floor. The overall height of the proposed house is 28 feet, which meets the height limit in this zone. And as proposed, the first floor plate height is 10 feet, and the second floor plate height is 9 feet. The roof consists of shed and gable roofs with 4 feet and 12 feet roof pitch, appropriate to the design context. These are 2 section drawings provided by the architect. And in terms of the design and details, staff believes that the proposed architectural details, distribution of materials, colors, including smooth stucco finish, stone veneer wainscot, metal roof, roof fascia, eave details, primary door, garage door, metal side gates, balcony railing, and windows are consistent and reinforce the proposed contemporary design concept, which is appropriate to the neighborhood context of various architectural styles. The front entry porch also is well integrated into the overall design. Moving to the next slide. The new windows, which are dark color vinyl windows, are recessed with sills appropriate for the proposed architectural style with combination of awning and hung windows. A condition, these are some other. A condition of approval is added to update the elevation drawing to show the window sills as proposed in the vertical window section drawing, which is in this page, I believe, yes. Moving to next slide. Also, the proposed plans do not show the location of the light fixtures. A condition of approval is added to show appropriate locations and design of exterior light fixtures. In the conclusion, staff is recommending approval of this design proposal with conditions that I mentioned, which were 5 conditions. Thank you for your time, and we're available for your questions.
Thank you. Board members, do we have any questions for staff at this point?
I do. I have a question.
Please.
When you were working with the applicant, did you explore design options that took advantage of the alley for the vehicular access to the site?
We discussed the options, but this is what the applicant wanted to propose. Considering that the adjacent neighboring property have the same context in terms of the driveway access from the street.
Okay, and question: if there were to be an attached garage on the house, what would have to be the setback from the alley in that situation? I'm not quite familiar with what the code would be in this particular case.
So your question is if the garage was attached to the house at the rear?
Correct, and accessible from the alley.
If the garage was attached to the house at the rear of the property, the interior setback from the rear property line has to be 6 feet, the minimum 6 feet.
6 feet, okay.
From the
Okay,
sides,
thank you.
Eileen?
And at the side also 6 feet. But you need to consider that we may need a driveway access to alley, so there should be driveway. So the 6 feet interior setback is not going to be sufficient because there is going to be a driveway access to the garage from the alley.
Well, that was my question. Is there the need for a driveway access from
The
the
minimum
alleyway
length for
as
the
well?
driveway access is 20 feet.
I'm sorry, say again?
The minimum length for the driveway access is 20 feet in this zone. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I believe so.
And does it make a difference if the garage is not attached to the house? Is it still 6 feet setback? So, okay.
For the detached garage, interior setback doesn't have to be 6 feet.
It could be
Interior
less.
setback from the side property line, yes.
Okay.
The setback from the alley would be 6 feet or 18 feet.
We still need to have a driveway access rather than it's attached or detached garage. Willia can confirm.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is Commissioner Smith.
Yes?
Could you describe the process for reviewing an application like this to demolish a building that's more than 30 years old?
Who are you pointing the question to?
I'm asking staff. We're at staff questions.
Okay.
Yes, we follow our review process, and we did that in this case.
Do you have a review then, Mr. Platt?
We do not
Do you have an
prepare,
evaluation?
we do not prepare evaluations for every property that's proposed for demolition. We have an arrangement with the Historical Society that we do look more closely at intact craftsman properties before we bring them to the board with the demolition proposed. If you want to discuss this issue further, it is
Oh,
not.
I have more ideas. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Jay.
Well, if I
So
may
in
suggest.
Santa Monica and in Pasadena, such an application would go through the Historic Preservation Commission. And I looked at the
May I-
Ms.
may
Smith,
I
Ms. Smith,
interrupt?
as the chair, I'm just going to hop in for a moment. I think this is a general policy question that you're bringing up, and I think
Yes,
the best,
and I will continue it.
and I think the best venue for this is the city council. I don't think that's
Oh,
within,
well, in this
I don't
case,
think that's
we're,
within our preview to get into that. I think.
so we would be the CEQA, this is exempt from CEQA. And we would be approving that. This house was built a year after that tract was platted. 1904, but I would think that staff performs at least a quick review. I was a little surprised to see this, so I will leave it at that. I will continue asking this question.
Yeah, I think the best avenue to pursue is the council on these kind of policy matters. In general, staff in the past has reviewed projects, and if they deemed as though important to have some sort of a historic review, then that was required.
I'm saying I do not understand that, because you can't tell by looking at a property whether or not it has significance.
Yeah, and I assume staff looks into that. So if it's deemed not to have that significance, I don't think it's within our board to have that discussion. I believe that needs to happen prior to a public hearing. So I believe that needs.
Checked with staff. Thank you very much. So in this case, there isn't any backup to. I'm just asking. So there's no backup to for this opinion that it's not historic. I'm certainly not saying it is, but who knows?
Well, if you're not saying it is, and who knows, then we should at least discuss the design, which we do know enough about to
But
discuss.
the house will be demolished in order to enable this project to go forward. That's my question. What is staff's process? And all I got is it's not historic. I don't have any backup.
Again,
You can
if,
decide on your vote based on your uncertainty. But
That's
it would be
right.
unfair to vote against a new design because you're unsure of the city's longstanding policy and practice. As Mr. Simonian said, if you want to change, if you believe that that practice should be changed, this is not the venue to make that
My
change or to lobby
question
for
was
that
what the
change.
process is to review a building that is more than 30 years old, because that's what's in
As you might recall,
application.
City Council recently changed that policy, and it's no longer over 30 years old. It's a review of all demolitions, and we do look at this. We do look at all of our demolitions that are brought to either the board or are just demolished for another reason. We
Right.
look at this
What's
house
the
as a
process, Jay?
highly altered example of a property built in 1924, both the original building and the additions that have been added to it. And we believe that this property no longer has the ability to convey any significance associated with its construction in 1924.
That was my question, what that process was.
again, Ms. Smith,
Anything
I'm going to
further?
interject. I'm going to interject as the chair. I believe as though we're going around in a circle at the moment, and I don't think this is the right forum to have this discussion.
Aren't we approving this?
Again,
sequel?
again, I believe you should have this discussion more in line with the council office, and I believe that council should review this policy if they believe and think that the policy should be changed. So with that, I'd like to move on and start considering the design of the project, which is in preview of this board. And if you're uncomfortable voting on the project, you could certainly not do so, and we'll see if it has enough votes to either get approved or not get approved. But I really like us to move on at this point. Do we have any other questions for staff regarding this project? So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and open up the public portion, and go ahead. Yes.
Chairman Simoni, I'm not sure if you would like me to answer the previous question that Board Member Welch had. For a detached garage located at the rear, the detached garage can be at the 0 property line, so it does not have to have the 6-foot setback that a new single-family residential home would have to have. It can be on the interior property line. it would have to provide a 20-foot setback from the property line at the rear. So it would have to essentially include that 20-foot driveway. That does not count towards the back alley. So unlike a typical turning radius or a backup space that you would have normally in a residential zone, they can't utilize the alley for that backup or turnaround area, but they would have to provide the 20-foot driveway on site.
Thank you for the clarification. So I think we got good feedback on that. Mr. Welch, Board Member Welch, do you have any other questions pertaining to the detached garage, if it's located at the rear with clearances, setbacks, et cetera?
No, I think I'm clear on it now. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I'm going to turn over and open the public portion, and we have the applicant, Mr. Azadi. Mr. Azadi, you're on the air. If you would, introduce yourself, state your name for the record, and walk us through the project and share with us any thoughts you would like us to consider.
Thank you. My name is Bijan Azadi. I am the project architect, and I thank the staff for the time they spent in reviewing the project and the recommendations. There's one thing I like to point out in the conditions of approval recommendations from the staff on page 7. Item number 3, recommendation, revise the plans to reduce the floor to ceiling plate height by 1 foot. I'm afraid this is not possible. The way the building is designed, it's designed specifically to meet the 21-foot high wall height requirement and 28-foot overall building height requirement. And we are having 8-foot high doors and window headers to match. So it's not possible to have an 8-foot high plate and 8-foot doors. It just simply is not going to work. Otherwise, the other recommendations, conditions of approval are acceptable, and again, I appreciate the staff for taking the time.
So just for clarity purposes, you're saying it's a hardship to lower the plate heights because you'd like to maintain an 8-foot door, and you'd like some clearance between the 8-foot door and the finished ceiling. Am I understanding that correctly, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you okay with all the other conditions?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And I have some questions for you, but I'm going to let the board members go first. Are there
Please.
questions for our applicant at this point?
I did want to ask the same question I asked the staff. Had he thought in terms of trying to do some kind of vehicular access from the rear, from the alley?
Mr. Azadi?
Yes.
There's a question from one of the board members asking if you've considered and looked into having access from the rear.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Well, there are two options. If we were to use the alley, one would be a detached garage. For a modern house, the detached garage nowadays is really not preferable. Suppose it's raining hard and you're coming home and now all of a sudden you have to walk from the garage to the house. An attached garage would take up half of the yard for driveway for the car to get to the house, and you're trying to have a little pool, some outdoor entertainment area. It would really interfere with that. And so I did, since we do have an alley, I did look into that, but it just seemed not very practical. Especially the house next door has a garage facing the street, a 2-car garage, and so I thought it's not really in conflict with other homes in the vicinity.
Okay. Any other
Thank you.
questions for the applicant?
I do, thank you.
Yes?
Commissioner Welch, did you have any more? Okay. Mr. Azadi, thank you so much for being here. Could you describe your overall architectural concept that you intended for this?
Well, the concept was to have a modern, contemporary house, but at the same time, since most of the, or almost all of the houses on the block have sloped roof, so I introduced a sloped roof, and in order to keep within the contemporary style that I had in mind, I went to sheet metal roof, but the design is meant to be very clean and streamlined, modern, contemporary.
Thank you very much. I wanted to point out that the house that's next door with the front-facing garage that you were referring to was pre-design review. That was built in '83, so it's not really a precedent-setting design. I'm curious about how this design satisfies the design guideline that specifies openness toward the street. Could you describe that to us?
Openness from the street?
Yes.
Well, we do have a 25-foot setback from the street. The house is facing the backyard. It's not. We use a glass garage door, the frosted glass garage door, so it wouldn't be all opaque towards the street. We have a balcony facing the street on the front. So we did give some attention to that, but in general, the house is designed to be in connection with the backyard and indoor-outdoor functions for the people who live in the house.
I see. Thank you. Could you talk a little bit about whether or not you, along the lines of what Commissioner Welch was talking about, if you considered the open lawn that's at the very back of the lot, putting that at the front so that the neighborhood would have a setback and a front lawn like most of the other houses in the neighborhood have? I'm not sure if you looked at that.
No, I'm sorry. You're talking about moving the house further back?
Yes, and it would have a front lawn like most houses have, a larger front lawn. Using that lawn area that's proposed at the very back against the alley. I'm just asking if you considered that.
I understand that, but the idea was to maximize the backyard for the use of the occupants. We're meeting the required front setback requirement that we were given. If the city wanted us to have a bigger front setback, they could have put that in the zoning code and tell us to have a 40-foot front setback, and we would have gladly complied with that. But this was the requirement we were given, and we complied with that.
If I could jump in, there is extensive planting areas. There's extensive planting areas in the front of the house that meet all of our zoning requirements. That is actually similar to all properties that the board reviews in similar neighborhoods.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and
Yes.
Can you zoom in? Maybe let's zoom out. Yeah.
Enough?
Uh,
Can go a little bit closer, probably.
Yeah, that's perfect.
we'd like to call your attention to the aerial image that Ms. Babakani just provided. I'm not sure if GTV6 is actually picking it up or not.
From what I could tell, at least from this aerial, there seems to be a general prevailing setback that more or less is around 20 feet.
The average front setback here within 300 feet linear of the property is 31 feet.
31 feet.
But considering that there are buildings like this that have like huge setback.
Right. And if, but
It
just
can
from
move
what I'm
around.
seeing here, I'm trying to understand, let's say if you go 2 buildings over and you do a little distance from that edge of home to the street, what is that distance?
Which area you're talking?
Like 2 homes over, right? from
Uh-huh.
us? One more?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that one? Like, what is the distance from, because that looks like to be about a prevailing setback, at least from what I could tell.
Yeah, the issue on a block like this is there really is no prevailing setback because there's so much in and out, and some of the, possibly the older properties with the deeper setbacks kind of skew that number.
That's what I'm, yeah.
When we work with applicants, if there is a prevailing setback, we try to maintain that on a project. If there is variation along the block front, I think it gives the applicant more opportunity to kind of work with that variation and meet the code requirement without having a deeper setback. But I'm not sure if that's what Board Member Smith was asking for. I wasn't sure if you were just asking for lawn at the front or a deeper setback.
Okay, that property is 1251L. I'm trying to find the setback for 1251.
Reason why I'm pointing that one out, it just seems as though it's matching overall most of the ones that are kind of within that range, not the deep ones.
So 1247 is 66 feet. 1251L, which is the subject property that Mr. Simonian is addressing, the neighborhood survey provided by the applicant shows the street front setback of 44 feet.
That's the subject property.
No, this is the two property
It's
up.
over.
Yeah.
Sure doesn't look like 44
That doesn't
feet.
look like 40
To
feet.
me, that might be from the curb rather than from the
Well,
property
what
line.
let's, instead of guessing, maybe take a moment to find that out, but we can move on and come back to that. I want to be accurate, because it doesn't look like 40 feet. Are there any other questions for staff at this point?
Yes, I actually had one more clarification question, and for the applicant presumably, or for staff. But I noticed that there seemed to be a slight differential between the site plan on the plans versus the landscaping and irrigation plan. At the back of the property against that alley, where the pool is between the pool and the alley, there's a walkway that connects to the alley, and in one drawing it looks like it's 4.5 feet wide with like a single door, and another looks to be about maybe not twice, but quite a bit wider than that with 2 doors. And I'm wondering which is actually the prevailing one. Is it on the top site plan or on the landscaping plan?
Yeah, you're right.
The site plan, I believe, is the final one. The landscape plan is going to have to be updated.
Okay.
And we're going to have to add the lighting on that plan as well.
And then Board Member Welch, what sometimes happens is, in some cases, the board prefers what they see on either a rendering or a landscape plan, and that's an opportunity to voice your opinion that you prefer that, but in general, the architectural drawings are what we treat as the final document. And just to fill in, I was able to do a Google aerial measurement for the second house up that we were just discussing, and it shows it being about 24, 25 feet setback.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question for the applicant. When we're looking at the south elevation, you already have one chimney, and then you're introducing a second chimney that's really for the fireplace for the outdoor patio in the back. And I'm wondering if you've considered a direct vent where you wouldn't have to, have a second chimney going up and introducing that new form. Have you considered that?
It is going to be direct to vent anyway. The chimney is more decorative, so it really, the chimney usually reinforces this idea of residential and home, and it has a stone veneer, and I thought it's a decorative element more than anything. It doesn't really have to be there if you don't feel comfortable about it. You can take it out. It's not integral to the project.
And then two other questions. I'm noticing a very vibrant reddish cola color for all the fascias, which is then going into the trellis as well in the rear. Is there a particular reason you're going with such a vibrant color on the fascias and also the trellis at the rear?
Well, it's a cherry color. It's going to be dark cherry, as you see on the sample board. And on a color wheel, it's the opposite color of the patina, green patina that's used for the roof. So I just wanted to have that vibrant effect,
I see. And then
the contrast.
And then you're adding to that vibrancy by then doing the Swiss coffee gutter. So it just, the patina green with the red seems a bit, oh, I just got the actual material board handed to me. Seems a bit.
Well, the Swiss coffee was meant to be more neutral and passive and not draw attention to the downspots.
So the dark cherry color that's on your material board is probably closer depiction than what's in your color elevations, I assume.
Yes.
Okay.
But the colors sometimes don't, when you print it
I
on
understand.
the plotter, don't come out realistically. So the actual colors are what's shown on the color board.
I see. And then on the similar note, your pavers, you have this aged color on your material board that seems very yellow. Is that an accurate depiction?
It's meant to be kind of a beige color. Again, meant to be neutral. So it's not. The picture came out a little more yellow than I intended. It's supposed to be a little more beige color.
Understood. My last question, sir, as it pertains to the stone veneer in the front. Have you considered other, I guess, ways to apply it that's not as heavy? And have you considered kind of continuing it around the corner as well, higher, if you're going so high in the front, or lowering the front portion where it's not going all the way up? Just what's the thought process there with the stone veneer?
Well, the thought process was that the stone would provide a base, heavy base, like it's done in many buildings, provide the contrast. Then on the sides, I try to carry that around, but the sides really are not seen from anywhere behind the gate. So the owner, we thought it might not be necessary because nobody can see it. On the front, the stone is carried to the top of the wall, and I believe it provides a variation and contrast that we wanted.
I see. Okay. Board members, do we have any other questions for the applicant? I'll take the silence as no. Do we have anybody from the public that is waiting to speak on this? Nope. For the record, we did have the neighbor send in a letter, correct? And so we have that, and board members, I believe you were copying on that. Vilya sent us that email. But besides that, since we don't really have anybody on the public side, I'm gonna go ahead and close the public portion. Mr. Walsh, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is one of those situations where it's unfortunate that the city's sort of requirements nowadays seem to almost make these alley-type systems obsolete and impossible to work with. Because when these streets were originally platted, the whole idea was to remove vehicular access from the street, remove the curb cuts, and have all that stuff hidden in the back. And it's just unfortunate that I don't think that's really practicable nowadays to try and do even a detached garage, frankly, off of an alleyway with the restrictions that are put in place unfortunately, we have to work with what we've got. But I do think that there's still some objections that I would make to the design. Stylistically, I think it's okay. I think, reducing the front setback is, reasonable. I think that staff and the applicant got it about right in terms of where it is. I think that it's still very massive and out of scale with the rest of the street, and I think that the second story should be set further back at the very least from where it is, because that, especially with the volume that second floor above the front doorway is enclosing, is just big open space. And it's really making more of an imposition on the street than I think is necessary to support the design. And the bedrooms and the master bedroom and the other bedroom above the garage also, I think, could still be positioned and moved back a little bit. So that would be something that I would like to see added as a condition to make this more, appropriate. Because my first preference would obviously be to put the garage in the back and have access from the back, and not have the car in the garage facing the street. As board member Smith mentioned, just because a house is existing to it next door, that doesn't mean that is setting a precedent for what has to happen afterwards. I think that's a situation we run into all the time. Designs that were approved pre-DRB don't necessarily mean that we have to follow them as precedent. So that would be my view. Otherwise, I believe that the staff's conditions are correct. I think the height should be reduced by the level that is stipulated. I can appreciate the applicant's desire to have 8-foot doors, but 8-foot doors are not standard, and there's no obligation on us to approve a height that allows them to have 8-foot doors because that's their preference. I think staff got it right in having a reduction in that height. So those are my feelings on the project. I don't really. I'm not a huge fan of the design, but again, it's relatively true to itself in terms of being a modern design, and trying to mesh with that kind of a style of modern design. Not my personal favorite, but I'm not going to try and redesign it for him. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Board Member Welch. Board Member Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, thanks. In reviewing this, aside from what I've talked about before, the openness toward the street, which is in the design guidelines, the overall architectural concept, which Mr. Azadi addressed, thank you. I noticed that the garage is absolutely the predominant feature. The fact that the proposed project has laminated white glass, frosted glass, that big 8-foot door, it really doesn't give it any openness to the street, and it doesn't really invite activity or show animation or make it part of the neighborhood. It makes it seem a little bit like a castle and nobody can come in. The predominant pattern on the street of having a front garage door is 15%. So I was concerned that was described as enough of a precedent. I do not believe it is. I see how many things are being put onto this lot, which makes it difficult, but I absolutely agree with Commissioner Welch regarding the garage situation. And, people don't have to go from their houses to their garages. I was not very impressed by that argument, but thank you. The stone veneer, of which I am not personally a fan, in this case looks one-dimensional as it's proposed. It's shown here and there in the design other than in the front. I agree with staff's condition that it wrap around more because its one-dimensionalness adds to all of this. The second nested gable, the front-facing gable at I think it's the master bedroom over the garage, is out of scale and appears to be out of place. It's just kind of a little detail stuck on. It doesn't seem to have a purpose. I believe the color combination is vibrant. That was a good way of putting it, Mr. Chair. I think it's a little, it calls attention to itself a little bit too much. I agree regarding the door height being too high for the design, the scale, and the neighborhood, and I think that the plate level should be lowered on both floors. I agree with staff. The context, scale, and proportions are not really compatible with the neighborhood. It's more compatible with the house next door, which was, as we already discussed, pre-design review, which doesn't make it a neighborhood precedent, and it's not a reason to approve it. I went through the residential design guidelines and found quite a few things that it doesn't really meet. I can go through them, but I don't think that exercise is very interesting to everyone. I think the applicant maybe would want to look at those more closely. For instance, they answer that it doesn't have openness to the street. It doesn't comply with the design guidelines. I note that the solar system for the new building is not incorporated in the plans. I don't understand how exactly it would work with this design, and I think it's important that the design work with the solar panels, or however this is going to be incorporated. I note that, again, the lighting plan isn't included, so we're not reviewing it. I've brought this up in every design review meeting, I think, that if it's subject to DRB, then it's not something that should just go to staff. And I was told it won't be in the future, but that was a couple of months ago now. Lastly, I'm most concerned about the CEQA point, but I won't belabor that. I thank you for your indulgence, and I'm curious where this will go. Thank you.
If I could just throw something in. I don't believe there is a staff condition to increase the distribution of the stone cladding around the house. So if that's something the board would like to see, we need that as a new condition.
Thank you, Board Member Smith and Mr. Platt, for that clarification. I overall agree with the board members. Mr. Welch, I agree with you, and the existing code and the way it's written, it's really hard on these smaller lots to try to fit in a detached garage at the rear of the property, because in so doing, you're really going to eat away a lot of your usable yard. That said, if you're integrating a usable yard with a pool, etc., which I could absolutely support and I think is a good idea, at the same time, you may want to reduce the second story massing as much as possible, and perhaps even reduce that balcony on the second floor on the rear yard, because you're basically having a lot of usable yard created. And so if the second floor massing is an issue, and I believe it is, I think it could be lightened up a bit. And if we are pushing back the second floor, especially from the street side back, I think there are some very easy solutions to it. As one is maybe even get rid of or eliminate the balcony in the front over the garage. And secondly is maybe even push the second story back a bit, reduce or eliminate that balcony, massive second story balcony in the rear. Then the spiral staircase goes away, the monumental, ornamental, I should say, second chimney stack goes away, and then all of a sudden you end up with a reduced mass. Now, if one wants to further reduce that mass, then of course the plate heights come into play, which would again further add a layer of reduction. I'm looking at the color board here. The dark cherry cola as depicted is actually a somewhat nice color. I would steer away from further emphasizing the downspouts and the gutters with the Swiss coffee. I think that coupled with the patina becomes very vibrant and just too much in a sense. And so already the patina metal roof, and I'm a big fan of metal roofs, but the patina is already very unique to begin with. And when you kind of couple that with some of the strong gestures that are being created, I think it is becoming a bit overbearing. I believe part of that overbearing is the amount of stone used in the front. I think it's a good idea to use stone veneer. I don't have a problem with the specific stone veneer. I like the way it at least carries on the sides. I think that's done tastefully. I think it's done tastefully going up the main chimney, but taking it all the way up the walls of the front seems a bit heavy-handed. And so I do support reducing the mass of the house by either pushing it back, as I indicated, or lowering the plate heights. And also would like to have some discussion internally about that balcony in the rear and the spiral staircase, etc. So those are my comments. And I guess there was a common denominator about mass and scale. And Mr. Board Member Welsh did mention pushing it back, and I agree with that. And I guess we could then try to formulate some consensus here.
So yes, I largely agree with that. I think that I don't know. I'm not as convinced about the removing on the balcony on the front. I think that actually is something that does something to address the street. And by having that little gable nested within a gable, it does help to break up the massing of that portion, the right-hand side of the design. So I think if the whole second floor structure were just to move back a little bit, that I think it would work okay even with leaving the balcony on the front. I also agree with the balcony on the back. I think it is very massive. And, you know, it's not really visible from the street, but it certainly is part of the problem of the massiveness of the overall design. So I would be okay with asking that to be reduced in scale as well. And I think your comment about having that as just a a vented fireplace without the second, the chimney climbing up to the second floor, I think that's correct. I think having two chimneys side by side like that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think that could be encapsulated in just if they want to have a fireplace, they can do a fireplace and just have a rear vented unit installed there. So those would be my thoughts. I'm not sure how to address the stone veneering. I agree with you. It is a lot, but I'm not sure exactly what a recommendation would be to solve that, unless perhaps we could just make a condition to lessen it as a sense of mass and scale at the facades. Is that something that staff could work with as a condition?
I would support that too. Board Member Welsh is a general condition that would basically dictate staff to work with the applicant to reduce the amount of stone in the front and to make it more of a coherent integration into the size of the building.
This is Commissioner Smith. I would think that stone should resemble the purpose of a water table, maybe being 4 feet up. What do you guys think of that? Rather than a bay.
I mean, I think that's what they've done on the side. It's reaching up to the bottom sill plates of the windows along the sides. And it could be just carried over and the same on the facade. I'm not sure. I think that they were trying to go for something a little bit more monumental on the front. So that's why I was sort of deferring to staff on what their opinion is of how we should be directing them.
Staff could go either way. Putting in a stone wainscoting is something we do all the time, and it's becoming almost like a cliche. It usually looks okay, but you see it everywhere. this was a little bit different, but we could certainly do that. I think that because the design will change and we're going to have some intervening roof at the first floor level as we step back to second floor, and we'll have some roofing there, I think there'll be some significant changes, and we could work with a combination of reduced stone at the front and figure out the best places for that, and then wrapping it at the sides more with the wainscoting that would link the chimney to the front of the house in a nice way, I think.
Yeah, and I think on sheet 8.0, section 1, as Board Member Welsh indicated, you know, the veneer is going to the windowsill, and that seems to be just about 4 feet. It looks about 3'6", so it's not quite as high as 4 feet, but it certainly couldn't go any higher than that, because then it would look, you know, awkward if it was going up and down, zigzagging across the side.
Has to be level. Good.
Mr. Platt, do you have can you read the conditions so far as to how you have it?
Sure. I think the consensus is clear that all 3 board members want to see the scale and massing reduced. That will involve a reduction of the second floor area, further step backs from the sides. We have 2 sections that are straight 2-floor shots, reducing those, and then also, what was the thought there? Pushing the whole second floor mass back, so that will eliminate a large part. What I picture is some of that mass can be supported over that first floor covered patio, and then the second floor balcony would just be reduced in size to some degree, or to a large degree, I would think. We have consensus, well, and one of the solutions also would be to reduce the double height entry area, but I only heard Mr. Welsh mention that, but that would be something we could consider working with the applicant in terms of breaking up the mass there. In terms of, we had some disagreement about the gable at the front, so I haven't heard consensus on that. I think everyone's okay with the color palette, or at least a couple of people are okay with the color palette, as long as the downspouts and gutters, I think if we paint those to match, or have those colored to match the adjoining surface that they're attached to, that would kind of make them disappear a little bit. Board Member Smith mentioned the solar installation. As we all know, we can't do design review on that, so we won't be able to put that in as a condition. And there wasn't complete consensus on the front balcony, so if you wanted to discuss that further. I think deleting the chimney at the patio will kind of naturally happen with the mass being pushed back toward that or over part of that balcony. We'll reduce the amount of stone use at the front, and then make sure it's tied together with the rest of the design through lower wainscoting, which I picture possibly that wainscoting could wrap perhaps at the entry area, but leave the garage clad with stone. If you have any ideas, that would be helpful, but we can definitely work with the applicant. And that is, I believe, what I heard from everyone.
Mr. Platt, I
Yes.
think I'm so sorry, you misunderstood the solar comment.
Yes.
But what's in the design guidelines is that the design for the house needs to be integrated with the solar, whatever the solar system is, and without seeing it, the house is not. That's what I've been saying.
Yes, the guidelines have been superseded by state law, so we won't be able to put that in as a condition.
No,
I haven't
the
heard
state law,
consensus either.
I'm so sorry, the state law requires the solar panels. What the design guidelines say is that the design for the new project needs to be integrated with the solar panels. So I think you're misinterpreting it and getting it backwards, and I
Actually-
apologize for any misinterpretation of that.
Board Member Smith, if we could have this discussion offline, but it seems to be coming up on every case, and we're going to
Yes,
have the
I
same
said that it
answer,
will.
and that answer is derived from the opinion of our city attorney. So please bear with us if you don't agree, but this is the official position of the city in terms of design review capabilities for solar installations. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to make a correction. I had mentioned the height of the door as well, that I think a standard door is 6'8", and the 8 feet door guiding the height of the plate was kind of the tail wagging the dog as well.
Yes, and the staff condition to reduce the floor plate at each level by 1 foot will take care of that, so.
Thank you.
Okay. In general, I think I had made the comment about the possible reduction of or elimination of the front balcony. And I think overall, if we're pushing back the second floor's mass, both on the sides and front, then in my opinion, if that front balcony stays, it could be integrated properly into the setbacks that we are now prescribing. I'm also okay with the roof lines as depicted in the front. I think there was some consensus about Mr. Welch actually indicating that it was done in a proper way, and I don't have a problem with it as long as, you know, the mass is moved back. So I think those were the only items that there was maybe some thoughts from staff that there was no consensus on. So I think we're on the same page. So if someone wants to make a motion, we could perhaps see if we could
I'm not
move
sure
this
if
case
Mr.
along
Platt
somehow.
mentioned the rear balcony reduction in the
We did,
size of,
yeah.
okay, great. So, waiting for the motion.
So I'll move to approve the project with conditions, all of the existing staff conditions, plus the additional conditions that we have discussed here, which includes reducing the mass of the second floor and setting it back further away from the current planes that are there on the plans presented. Eliminating or significantly reducing down the second chimney at the back of the property, reducing the scale of the back patio that projects from the back of the house, and to work with the applicant on reducing the or reworking the stone cladding at the front facade to make it appear somewhat more integrated into the design and less perhaps massive than it is right now. Did I capture all of the points? Okay, so that would be the motion.
Downspouts and gutters we'll throw in there for the.
And downspouts and gutters, yes, thank you.
Oh, can I just add, before you vote, I heard discussion of the spiral stair. If the size of the second floor balcony is significantly reduced, but they still wanted to have access to the garden or the backyard from there, is the stairway itself okay?
I don't particularly, I mean,
I don't particularly
yeah, have an opinion one way or another. If they really want that access to their second floor, it's not the end of the world if it's done nicely.
Is there a second?
Since there does not seem to be a second, I'm going to pass the gavel along to Board Member Welch and second that motion.
Our first virtual gavel pass.
I know. I'm going to toss it over.
So we have
And
a
do I need to
motion.
toss it back now?
At your convenience.
Okay. Yeah, I'll repass the baton to the man in the room there, so.
So we have a motion by Board Member Welch and seconded by Chairperson Simonian. And this is a roll call. Board Member Smith,
Nay.
Chairperson Simonian,
Yes?
and Board Member Welch.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Do we have any other items to discuss at this point?
No, there are no other Community Development Department updates. We would like to remind the board members and the public that, I'm gonna take on and off the mask, that the next scheduled design review board meeting of September 10th is canceled.
Okay.
So we will see everyone back here on September the 24th.
Well, happy Labor Day, everybody. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.